Hi, I'm James Naylor Green, Professor of Brazilian History and Culture, Emeritus at Brown University, and the National Co-Coordinator of the U.S. Network for Democracy in Brazil. This program is supported by the Washington Brazil office. This is Brazil Unfiltered. Today we have the pleasure of having with us a dear friend of mine, Heloisa Galvão. She's the co-founder of the Brazilian Women's Group and its executive director. She is the recipient of several awards, including the decoration of Ordem do Rio Branco, awarded by the President of Brazil to Brazilians living overseas, who were recognized for outstanding services to Brazil and Brazilian immigrants. Congratulations. I didn't know you had received that award until I did research for this program. And she holds a master's in print journalism and another in broadcast journalism from Boston University. And her latest publications are A Ditadura Como Eu Lembro, The Dictatorship as I Remember It, which was published in Caminhando e Contando, Memórias da Ditadura Brasileira, which was published by the Universidade Federal da Bahia in 2015. And I don't know that, Heloisa, and I'm really looking forward to reading that article. And an oral history of Brazilian women's immigrants in Boston area that's published in Passing Lines, Sexuality and Immigration, published by Harvard University. Heloisa has been a very, very important defender of Brazilian immigrants in the United States, and that's actually how we met originally in Boston. I would say sometime around 2003 or 4 or 5, when she was organizing amazing events at Harvard with other allies in defense of immigrant workers, and I was involved in doing international solidarity with Brazil. So Heloisa, welcome to Brazil Unfiltered.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Jim.
So first question, it's the most complicated one to ask and answer. How did you end up in the United States, and how did you get involved in women's rights activism?
I was living in Natal. I lived in Natal, Rio Grande do Norte, for 17 years. That's where I met my husband, and I raised my children. And I was so frustrated, because I felt I wasn't learning anymore. I was working in the newspaper, I was working at the university, but that was it. I had to buy the newspaper, to be a publisher in order to do something different, because I have done everything at the newspaper, and I really wanted to do something different. And at that time, a friend of mine who was a dean at the Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Norte, he came back from Boston. He had a PhD in chemistry. And he started talking about Boston and said, you have to go back. You have to go to Boston. You have to go to Boston University. And I loved the idea. And then I applied. He helped me to apply for Boston University. It was the only university I applied. And I was accepted. So I came in 1988 to do my master in journalism, and I just fell in love with the city, and I fell in love with being at the university as a student. I tried to do my master in journalism in Brazil, but I wasn't accepted because I didn't have an undergrad I didn't have a bachelor degree in journalism. I had in museum. I graduated from Universidade Estadual do Rio de Janeiro. At the time, wasn't the Universidade Estadual, was Museu Histórico Nacional, with a degree in museums, art museums. But I have been a journalist since I was 17. That's my passion. So university in Brazil wouldn't accept me because they said I had to do the undergrad. I said, oh, that's a waste of time. So when I came to Boston, I just fell in love with Boston University and the city in itself, because, I could do here everything that I could not do in Natal. And I wanted to go to Rio. My husband wouldn't move from Natal to Rio, but he came with me to Boston.
How did you stand the cold? Because I think that's the biggest shock from a carioca to go to the United States. When Brazilians would come to Brown, I would warn them, it's going to be much colder than you can even imagine. You're going to gain 10 pounds. It's going to be horrible. The winters are just horrible. How did you get through the first winter?
Well, indeed, to this day, the first snow, I am like a kid, My daughter knows, so she sends me pictures. She's in Virginia, she sends me pictures when she gets snow there. And I lived in Natal 17 years. There is no winter in Natal. not whatsoever. So I like to go to Rio in July when it's winter because I wanted to have socks. I wanted to have, long sleeve. I couldn't do any of that in Natal. Of course, the winter here, you can't compare to Rio. But I think that I love the change. I love the change of the seasons. I love, like now, I'm start seeing some green coming out of the ground, and I'm waiting for May, beginning of May, so I can do the window flowers. I just love the change, And the winter, yeah, it's not good when it goes for too long, but it's
You get used
it's
to it.
just you do different things.
Yeah.
For 17 years, I did the same in Natal, what was going to the beach Saturday and Sundays. There was nothing else to do. And drink beer. I don't drink beer, so. And here you do different things according to the season. And yeah, I love that.
So how did you become involved in the Brazilian Women's Group? And tell me more about the organization.
Well, the Brazilian Women's Group wasn't the Brazilian Women's Group, was a group of women that started meeting once a week to talk about what it was like to be Brazilian woman, a woman and immigrant in the Boston area. This was 1995, completely different from today. Wasn't too bad to be undocumented here. You could get a social security, you could get a driver's license, and there was no immigration going after you. Of course, you would get manual jobs, but it was easier. And I was hired part-time. I was finishing my undergrad, my master's, and I was hired part-time to run a family program to teach Brazilian women, new arrivals, about the American way of life. Of course, I never taught to them that. They knew much better than I did. They were very young, younger than I. They had very small children. And what we did is that we used to meet once a week at the library, read in Portuguese for the kids, and then let the kids, do whatever they want. And we would sit and talk about the long from Brazil, from our families, the difference and what the women felt here when they wanted daycare, but they couldn't find the care, things like that. And with time, what happened is that the women would go find some answers for what they needed, and then they would come back. And that was the seed of the Brazilian Women's Group. Because with time, we realized that there was such a need in the community. People would come to us and say, what is this? What is that? How can I do this? How can I do that? The program that I was hired for ended about 2 years. The money was over. But the woman that was my boss in Somerville, this was in Somerville, a city here that is beside that borders with Boston. She said, I want you to continue to meet with these women. So she gave me about $4,500 per year to meet with the women. And we had a lot of fun because we'd meet Friday evening and talk about whatever we want. Until about 2003, when we realized we had to be of more a formal organization because we were putting money out of our pockets to buy food, to do some things, to pay for babysitter, but we felt we needed a grant because by 2001, after the terrorist attacks, we lost the little space that we had in Somerville. That was a borrowed desk that somebody gave it to us that we could occupy on Fridays evening. At the school, was a community school that was open Monday to Friday until 9 o'clock, and we met at the kitchen. But we lost that. They closed the school, and we were kicked out, of course. So we moved to Alston because I went to the director of Massachusetts Alliance of Portuguese Speakers, my friend Paulo, and I told him, we need a space. He gave me a corner at this branch in Alston with a desk. He gave me a computer, and we realized we need money. And then we became nonprofit. We started writing grants. It took us long, maybe 2 years to get something. But we started getting some money. And then we became a nonprofit organization, and now we do 101 things.
We'll talk a little bit more about that later in our conversation tonight. But I think this month is March 8th is International Women's Day. The month of March has always been a month of celebrating women's important contribution to history and society. How would you understand and how would you describe gender imbalance and discrimination and sexism and the like in Brazil and then in the Brazilian community in the United States?
Well, I think we came a long way in Brazil, but it's still, I mean, tell me, right now the country is so divided, and the way they find to play politics many times is just making the women, their target. I I was privileged in my family because although my father wasn't feminist at all, but my father always told me, "You do what you want to do. Don't let anyone tell you what you should do. You decide your life." My mother was a strong woman. I mean, in my house, I saw the roles very equal in a sense because my father cooked and cleaned and my mother worked outside. So I grew up thinking that was the way. And when I got married, I never asked my husband, for his opinion on my life. But looking around with my friends, that wasn't the way. Many of my friends were more subject they were preoccupied with what the society would say, what the husband would say. I remember working with a woman, I was very young, like 24, and I would get a ride with anyone who would give me a ride home in Natal. But she said, "Oh my gosh, I can do that. My husband will be so mad at me." And when I came here, that I went to BU, then it even opened my mind more because and then it was so different from Brazil. Women were much more independent. And then when I co-founded the Brazilian Women's Group. I had the opportunity to go to all these meetings. And I thought, gosh, there is so much to learn and to do. It's so important that we play our role in society and that we realized how we are used to be controlled and how men need the power to control us. So looking back and looking now, I think that it's very different the way we see gender role or gender discrimination in Brazil and here in a way. But I think that in Brazil, we have come a long way, although still have a long, long road to take. But I think that in Brazil, women who are workers, women who are, who like domestic workers, like nannies, I think that sometimes they have a more clear, sometimes not always, but sometimes I think they have a more clear idea what they can do, what they can't do, because they participate in co-ops, they participate in community, different from middle class, which is more, I don't know, they tend to fill this role that is expected of them. In the United States, I think we are much more educated, and there is much more information about this. I had this experience with a family member who suffered domestic violence, and she perceived pretty soon what was happening to her because of the game when she was very young. What happened to her in school because what she learned in school, what she experienced in school. I think in Brazil, these things are much more difficult because the family tend not to talk about, and there is this perception that, you gotta do what your husband to tell you to do. So you go from your father to your husband, and you always belong to a man. Um, I am generalized, but I think that here you have much more information about what it is, what your whole role in community, and I think in society, and I think that that makes a difference.
I think also immigrant women, whether from Brazil or from other parts of Latin America, other parts of the world, they're forced to take a very active role in surviving.
Yes,
And they have to survive not just in the home, cooking and taking care of the kids, but finding work, being a housekeeper, doing some other kind of work in a factory or somewhere else, and negotiating the real world and being very practical about that, having to be concerned constantly with getting food on the table. And so I think there's maybe a pragmatism and a down-to-earthness that might contribute to that in terms of women being much more independent and willing to, do things differently than they did in Brazil. Uh, Being an immigrant disrupts your life very much. It really makes you another person. You realize you're a different person when that happens. So let's talk a little bit about the situation of immigrants in this moment under the Trump administration. What's the current situation of the estimated 1.2 million Brazilians in the United States, of which perhaps we don't really know, maybe 500,000 are undocumented? What would you say is the current situation?
it's the worst that has been even after 2001. It's terrible. I can talk about Massachusetts. I don't know much about the other states, although we have been in communication with Brazilian activists in Florida, but it's very, very bad. And it's taking a big toll in people, mental health, health in general, jobs, housing, you name it, everything, people are so afraid. We do, for instance, the workers' rights. The other day, I was trying to convince a man that he should go to small claims because his boss didn't pay him, and he's not going to pay the 2,000 something that he owns the man, and he doesn't want to go to small claims because he says, if I go to court, immigration is going to pick me up. Yeah, yes, that might help, might happen. Yes, we've seen this here. In Massachusetts, immigration officer cannot go inside the court. We have a law here that prohibits, but they wait for you in the sidewalk, and people know that. And we see that they are picking people, one here, two there. I think I read today that during this past weekend, they arrested 370 people in Massachusetts, and five were Brazilians. The man called the border Keja, he said he would bring hell to Massachusetts because of the position of Boston Mayor Michelle Wu and the governor Maura Healey, because they defend immigrants, and we have laws here. We have the Trust Act that prevents police from work with immigration officers, and they don't like that. The federal government doesn't like that. But even though, and because of that, we are suffering a lot because they not giving us a break. 7 days a week, they here and they picking up people. Sunday, they were at a church in Everett parking lot. They were there. And then, they run after a man. I don't know if the man was Brazilian, but they run. I have the video. They run after this man in the sidewalk until they got the man. It's yesterday, no, the day before in the evening, they took the students from Tufts University. It's like persecution. It's pure persecution of immigrants.
The argument that Trump made originally, of course, to justify it, and still has the majority of the population supporting it, was that he was going to get rid of criminals, people who committed, and making the distinction, being confusing, because on one hand, he says that anyone who extends their stay, gets a visa, but extends their stay or crosses the border illegally, has no legal right to be here and therefore can be deported. But on the other hand, the big argument was we have to get rid of not the law-abiding citizen who is working hard, is paying their taxes, is, working in the community, but we have to get rid of the criminals. But it doesn't seem that they're necessarily targeting criminals when they're doing the roundups. It seems like they're just targeting people who are vulnerable. Do you have any information about that? Do you have a sense of whether there's a systematic seeking out of people who have, I don't know, are on parole for criminal violations or under court consideration and therefore are not in prison and therefore they're going to be arrested and then immediately deported? Do you have news about what's going on there in terms of application of the policy?
We do a little. I know that so far there are 167 Brazilians that have been picked up by immigration in Massachusetts since January 20. Indeed, another flight, charter flight, is supposed to go today or tomorrow. It's going to be the fourth flight or the fifth. The fifth flight since January 20. What the people that I know of that were arrested, they had no criminal records, and let make clear that to be here undocumented is not a crime. It's a civil offense.
Misdemeanor. It's like a parking ticket.
Thank you.
Exactly.
It's not a crime. I tell this to the community all the time when I do lives. And I know this week, maybe Monday, they picked up a man, a Brazilian, who has been accused of trafficking, human trafficking, bringing people from Brazil. Yeah. And it seems that there were two others that had criminal records. Yes. We are not advocating for people who committed crime to be on the street. But I think if the federal government was worried about that, they wouldn't free the 1,500 people who turned down Congress. So they are not worried about criminals. They are worried that they have to prove to their base that they are doing what they promised to do during campaign, which is deporting, I don't know, 1,500 a day or something. So we paying the price. And you see that the federal government, Department of Homeland Security, is going after people with green card, is going after people with visas, like the students at Tufts. So it's just politics, just proving to the base of this government that, yes, I promise and I'm delivering. Now, what's going to result of this is this: people are not buying, people are not going shopping, people are not working as many hours as they used to, people are not taking kids to school or going to the doctor. We get so many calls about people from people who are being evicted, and they are so scared that the landlord comes to their door and say, you have to leave. And they leave. And we tell that doesn't help, that we tell them, no, you don't have to leave. They don't have a court order. For you to leave, the judge has to evict you, send you an order, and the judge hasn't done that. For the judge to do that, they're gonna schedule a hearing, they're gonna hear your cause. But they get scared, and what this creates, facilitates that bad landlords and other bad employers, then they threat. If you don't do that, or if you denounce me, if you do this, do that, I'm gonna call immigration. And it's sad, but I have to say that immigration has received, people are calling immigration to denounce immigrants. Even Brazilians denouncing Brazilians who have heard, and immigration are going after them. Because before, if you call me, immigration wouldn't bother going after me unless they had proof that I am really a criminal. Right. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother. But now they go after anyone. They going after people who are here for 30 years. And they have a small business, are contributing to the economy. So, Jim, I don't know what the future will be like, but You are an American, and I have to tell you that Americans, white Americans from the suburbs, they are the one who have to stand up because it started with immigrants. They are on the green cards and student visa and other visas. They're gonna come after people like me who are naturalized Americans, and then they're gonna go after Americans, whoever threat them, threat
No,
their
you're
agenda.
really right. The other thing that really strikes me is that when I came back from Brazil in 1982, I lived in Los Angeles and I lived in a Latino community, living only with Mexicans and Central Americans. I was doing community organizing. I've never seen people working harder than the Mexican and Central American immigrants. Two jobs, three jobs, weekends working, you know, broken down car in front of the house. They're fixing the car so they can get to work on Monday. You have to have a car in Los Angeles. I've never seen anyone working so hard as these immigrants, and they really contribute to the economy. So it seems this is going to have a huge impact on the economy,
Yes.
especially as if the numbers don't meet Trump's fantasy numbers, he's going to insist on more numbers. And so they're going to have to be more arbitrary. So I can imagine next summer going to Martha's Vineyard and just picking up all of the Brazilian people who are working in lawn care and the
Mhm.
painters and the groundskeepers and all these people and just arresting them en masse, which means that upper middle class people who are used to having low paying workers working for them are not going to have those people. They're going to have problems finding people to do those jobs. It's going to be serious. And this is to say nothing of agricultural production, where Brazilians in this part of the country are much less involved in, but they're involved in meat packing in the Midwest and in other parts of
Mhm.
the country where if in fact many of the measures that are passed by this government, especially the tariff measures, come into place, it's going to disrupt the economy and also cause a lot of dislocation. And if Brazilians are deported, among other Latin Americans, the food is not going to be processed. It's not the crops are not going to be picked. The food is not going to get to the table in this country in significant ways, and prices are going to go up, and that's going to be significant.
Yeah, and I tell you that in Framingham, which is one of the largest Brazilian community in Massachusetts, the business are down 40%, and in Somerville as well, at between 40 and 6%.
I remember when I think this was in 2005 or six. There was a town in Connecticut, which Danbury, Connecticut, and I went to visit the Brazilians there who were organizing. And the downtown area, which had gone through an economic decline, a slump, had been totally revitalized by the Brazilians, who had 10 churches, 12 churches, two Catholic and 12 Protestant, 10 Protestant churches, and all the businesses in the downtown area. Totally revitalized the city. And if they weren't there, the city would have been in serious problems. And I don't know what will happen now as they're persecuting immigrants more and more. Um, Let me
And
ask
I
you,
can tell you, Jim, also that many Brazilians are planning on going back. We know that because they are requesting the residence, what do you call resident proof of residence to go back to Brazil. The consulate is flooded with those requests.
speaking of the consulate, you and I and a group of other people from the U.S. Network for Democracy in Brazil and the Washington Brazil office, we had a meeting with the Brazilian ambassador to the United States to talk about the situation of immigrants there. What's, you know, we can always be frustrated by whether governments actually respond to its constituencies. But I was very impressed by the receptivity of the ambassador to our concerns and the issues that we were raising. What was your impression of that meeting, and what are the possibilities that the Brazilian government could play a role in all of this? What can the Brazilian government do in this regard, since we have a progressive government in power in the country?
I thought the meeting was productive. Now I want to see action. I need to see the follow-up of the meeting. And I think Brazil, the government has done well uh, receiving the Brazilians deported and treated them as they should always be treated. But I am frustrated, totally frustrated, that Brazil has not stopped the charter flights going from the United States to Brazil. And I I am really frustrated that, I mean, I will be more frustrated if Brazil cancels or postpone for the seventh time charging Americans for an American passport because it has to be equal, you know, or as they call reciprocity. And I know that with the Harvard conference, which is going to take place here, I'm not sure about the dates, but it's now. And many visas have been denied.
So you're referring to the fact that well, under Bolsonaro gave up the requirement for U.S. citizens to have a visa to come to Brazil. And then that order, because of reciprocity, because the United States does not do the same, the current government returned to the old policy of reciprocity, but delay the implementation. And I know this well because my 10-year visa was up and I had to get a new passport and then get a new visa. They've postponed that. They postponed it to Carnival. And evidently now by April, one needs to have a visa to go to Brazil again. And the rules that apply to Americans, Brazilians in the United States applies to Americans in Brazil, which is the idea of reciprocity, which I think is a fair thing to do. I couldn't possibly talk to you without raising this important question of the movie that both you and I saw, Ainda Estou Aqui, which won the Oscar for Best Foreign Film, directed by Walter Salles, the story of Rubens Paiva, who was an opponent of the military when it came to power in '64, spoke against the coup, later supported the resistance and was arrested and disappeared, and his family never heard from him again. And I must say, Fernando Torres did the most amazing job as playing Eunice Paiva in the movie. It was really amazing. And when I saw the woman who got the Best Actress award in another movie, I went, "What? How did that happen?"
Yes.
I really didn't understand that. I think that Brazil really deserved three Oscars, not just one. But they got one, and that's good. It's the first time, and I'm very happy that that was the case. What was your impressions of the movie? What did you feel about the movie? How did that impact you?
Oh, I cried from beginning to end and brought me so many memories. I can't claim that I suffered with the dictatorship. I was 17, 18, 19. I was, as we say, a foca in the newspaper, in the newsroom, and I covered a lot of the things, a lot of the passeatas. I covered the funeral of Figueiredo, not Figueiredo, Costa Silva. And, I was interrogated by the police, but I can't claim. And the newspaper disappeared was apprehended a Sunday, and the editor has to go and say that he wrote the article, and then he told me I was not allowed to put my name, my byline on the newspaper anymore because he was afraid that I would be arrested. But I can't claim that I suffered with the dictatorship. But I saw a lot of people disappear, including the president of my university aggregation, Sonia, her name. To this
Sonia
day,
Wright?
no, I don't remember the last name.
Uh-huh.
I have no idea where she is to this date. I was the vice,
Vice
and she
president
was the president
of the student organization. Uh-huh. And that
at
was
the university. Yeah,
that was in the Museu Nacional?
Museu Nacional.
Uh-huh.
Never heard that she disappeared one day. One day, I hope she's alive,
Wow.
but I don't know.
Wow.
So I think the movie is historical, Jim. It's history in the make because so many people in Brazil say that didn't happen. The dictatorship didn't happen. It wasn't like we say it was, or the history say, that I think the movie is history. And I think that it doesn't matter. I mean, great that it won the Oscar, but it doesn't matter because the movie has brought to front stage the dictatorship to Brazil, which will be what, 61 now? April 1.
Yeah.
So, and I was thinking about that last night when I was listening to the news in Brazil, which I do every evening, and I was thinking, eu ainda estou aqui has a big role in Bolsonaro being indicted
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because It's impossible to deny. It's impossible to deny. These people, what they have done, not only in 64 to 85, but what they have done from 16 to, and still doing, to so many people, and laughing and make fun of people who are dying from COVID, or the way they treated our president, Dilma. It's so awful that I feel ashamed of my people. But I know that's not what we are. We are not that. That's a part, a minority of the country, of the right, that thinks like that. We are much better. And I think the film brings it.
It's interesting. I teach history of Brazil. I always am trying to tell people about Brazil and know how little people know about the country. And I was getting my knee replaced on Friday, and I went into the operating room, and the anesthesiologist said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "I'm a professor. Professor of what? Professor of Brazilian history." And I'm lying on the table. They put me under the drug. I'm about to pass out. And she said, "Did you see the movie I'm Still Here?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And we started talking about it. And then I don't remember what happened. I don't know if in the middle of a sentence I was knocked out. But that showed me, and I wrote a message to Vera Paiva, who is one of the daughters of Rubens Paiva, who we interviewed for Brazil Unfiltered and who is a friend, about the impact that the film had. So because it got an Oscar, people in the United States and around the world are going to be curious to see this film. It's gotten this little stamp of approval on it, and they're going to learn the history of the dictatorship, or one history of the dictatorship. And it's going to be very important in terms of the emotional impact it's going to have on them, because the movie plays with one's emotion, family and honesty and love and commitment and children growing up and all that. And I think it's another door into talking about what the history of the dictatorship was. And in that regard, it's very, very important. And I think you're right. It's the history of the country that needs to be told. Bolsonaro rejected that history, denied that history, said that history was not true. And this is really reinforcing that. So I think you're absolutely right also that the trial against Bolsonaro and the other people who are being indicted would not have happened, I think, if there weren't this groundswell of millions of people in Brazil who saw the movie. Many of my friends on the left took their relatives who are not leftists to see the movie in order to just talk to them about what's going on and to educate them more about that period in Brazilian history. So it was important. Do you have any stories of any American that you talked to who saw the movie and was impressed by the movie?
Oh, yeah. I have a friend who she does yoga with me, and she was saying how she was impacted by the movie, and she was telling the others Americans in class, you have to go and see this movie. The movie is still playing here
Yeah,
in
you know.
Boston. I saw in Brazil when I was there beginning of the year, the movie theater, the movie theater at the Universidade Federal Fluminense. I love that movie theater, and it's independent, like, play good movies. Was packed. Indeed, I was so naive that it's 10 minutes walking from my mother's apartment. So I just let last minute walk to the movie theater, and I couldn't get in.
Yeah, yeah,
Was sold out. So I bought the ticket for the next day, and was packed.
yeah.
And I'm telling you, I am so honored of have lived that history. I wrote in a newspaper about it. I wrote this article because a friend of mine, childhood friend of mine, asked me, and it's so important. And some people tell me, "Oh, that was a middle class family." Yeah, and happened to them. Imagine what happened to the poor people, because we don't know all the stories out there of people who were taken. And because of the movie, I heard who was saying that. I don't know, remember it for, I think was Rubens Paiva who was saying that. And Vera, I think, said that too in an interview, that they went I mean, shows around the country, or they were invited to go and talk around the country. And she said, every place they were, somebody afterwards would come and say, you know, my father, this happened to my father, this happened to my sister, this happened to our niece, this happened to a friend, people who you don't know.
No, no. It's a
You
very
know?
powerful movie. Really is, no question about that. So let's end our conversation with something positive. Do you have anything positive about the situation right now that you'd like to share with us? Anything out of this whole nightmare that we're living through that gives you hope?
Yeah, give me hope that we hear this almost every day, that ICE officers are very frustrated because in Chicago and here too, because people are educated how to confront them, and so they can't pick up. Sometimes they can't get the person because the person would say, "Do you have a warrant? If you don't have a warrant, so please leave it." And I saw a video in the what do you call oficina de automóvel? What do you call
It
that?
was in a car repair garage.
Thank you, car repair garage. They came, three men, through the back door, and they talked to a young woman who was saying, but they wanted to know who was employed. That there was no one there. Who is employed? Give us the name, give us the address. And so, well, why you wanted that? But she was very, she was young. She was very, maybe kind of afraid. And then the owner of the manager, I don't know which one, what he was, but he came and he said, "Do you have a warranty?" And the three silenced. He said, "You don't have a warrant? Please leave. You don't have the right to be here. This is a private place." And they left. And this story you hear sometimes. You hear that people, they went to a family, Brazilian family in Everett, and they knocked at the door. The family didn't open the door. And we teach this. We do know your rights, a lot of know your rights. Everybody's doing know your rights. And we say, don't open the door. If you open a little bit, it's like invite them to come. Don't open the door. Ask them, you have a warrant, put under the door. If the warrant is signed by a judge and has your name on top, then you have to open the door. Otherwise, say, sorry, I don't know this person. Or usually they don't have a warrant signed by the judge. They have a warrant that they signed, which means nothing. So this is a good note. People are knowing their rights, or some people are, standing up for their rights. And I think this is the most important thing, because this is how we're gonna fight back.
And Heloisa, you are a heroína in that sense, in terms of being one of the many people in the community that's really defending the rights of others, and it's very, very important. And I want to thank you very much for the work you're doing. It's been very important. It's been a pleasure seeing you and getting to know you and working with you over 25 years now. We've been working together. It's been really an honor. I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Brazil Unfiltered. I hope you enjoyed the interview with me, Heloisa.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, it was a privilege. Thank you so much. And I think that you look much younger with a new knee.
I hope so. So I hope you all enjoyed the interview. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the video. And if you've not yet subscribed, please do so. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It helps other people find the program. Have a great week. Until next time, até a próxima.